What's going on, y'all? It's me, Shamar Liberator. I'm back on this channel again. Look at consistency. We gotta give it for consistency. That's what I'm talking about. Today we are talking about the two most famous and talked about cameras in 2025: the Sony ZV-1 versus the Osmo Pocket 3. Now, both Sony and DJI, respectively, have been killing the vlogging game, especially for small content creators or content creators that don't want a big setup. And today we are reviewing both. Now, separately, I have made a video for these cameras alone, so make sure to check that out. I'll leave it in the description below, and also a card at some point in this video. These two cameras are beasts when it comes to vlogging, especially for small creators that are very shy. If you're into this kind of content, make sure to like and subscribe. Click that bell notification so that you never miss when I post. Now, quick disclaimer, I have not used both of these cameras at the same time in terms of the length of time that I've had them. I recently got the DJI Osmo Pocket 3, so that one is a little bit on the newer side, whereas the Sony ZV-1 I've had for a few years. So I know a lot more about the Sony ZV-1 than I do the Osmo Pocket 3. However, I have tested out the Osmo Pocket 3 both indoors and outdoors, and I do have some experience with this camera, reviewing other YouTubers talking about this camera prior to getting it. So I do know a lot about this camera before even using it in everyday settings. Starting out with the also famous Sony ZV-1. Now, obviously my setup is a little bit different. I have I don't remember the company. I completely apologize, but I'm probably going to put it in the video at some point. I do have a lens attached to the original body that comes with the Sony ZV-1, and I also have a Ulanzi light that's attached on top with a wind mic that comes at the bottom. Now, the original setup does have a wind mic. However, when I had to get a light, I needed a hot shoe on top because the light already comes with one that has to screw on. So now we're going to talk about the pros of the Sony ZV-1. First up, it shoots 4K. I think we're in 2025 now, and 4K is almost essential. Now, while this video isn't 4K, obviously I got to upgrade to 70 Mark II. For a small compact camera to shoot 4K, that's almost priority when it comes to vlogging. We have passed the world of 1080p now, or we're almost at the point where 4K is kind of the standard, and this camera does it really well. Now we're gonna get into the cons of shooting 4K on the Sony ZV-1 in a little bit, but at least you know that this camera can shoot 4K 60 frames a second. I don't believe it can go 120, but if it does, you can correct me if I'm wrong. But you can at least shoot 4K 60 frames a second. Second thing is that it takes full SD cards. Now, I'm not a huge fan of micro SD cards. It's not a downfall. However, I do like the essential full SD cards, especially for Apple MacBook Pro users, especially for those that have the newer MacBook Pros and you can insert a full SD card into the slot. Now, again, it's not a deal breaker. You can obviously put a micro SD into a full SD adapter and then connect it to your laptop. However, for me, just having the convenience of a full SD card matters to me a little bit more. But again, it's not a deal breaker. So that is another pro for the Sony ZV-1. Thirdly, it's small, it's compact. It's not smaller than the Osmo Pocket 3, but it is still small. You can fit it into your travel bag whenever you're traveling. It doesn't require much space. It literally can fit in my pocket. Now, while the Osmo Pocket 3 is smaller, so it fits in more spaces, the Sony ZV-1 still fits in my pocket. With the setup I have, it doesn't really do that anymore, just because obviously the bulky light and the lens that's attached makes it a little bit harder to fit in my pocket. However, this setup right here is still small. It allows me to shoot in the daytime without the light, and at nighttime when I turn on the light, I still get, you know, really good quality footage. I don't have to raise up my ISO, which makes the footage grainy, things like that. So this camera, even though it's not smaller than the Osmo Pocket, just with small accessories attached to it, it's still small and it gets the job done in terms of keeping my settings while also getting good footage. Another pro for the Sony ZV-1, I mentioned it a little bit, but not in depth, is the fact that this has an on-camera mic. This on-camera mic for most cameras sucks. More times than not, you need an external mic like the one I'm using now, or you need something else to compensate for the mic that's on the camera, which is very terrible. But for the Sony ZV-1, I can honestly say, even without attaching an external mic, obviously you can see I don't have a mic on mine. The in-camera mic sounds so good. My goodness, in terms of vlogging, I don't have to worry about a big setup because the Sony ZV-1's mic is good on its own. I don't need to attach anything. Now, that's not to say that it's the greatest thing in the world. Obviously, you get better quality when you have an external mic. However, it's not necessary for the Sony ZV-1. I've used it outside, I've used it in windy settings, I've used it in indoors, I've used it in crowds. And the Sony ZV-1 sounds good on its own. Now we're gonna get into the cons of this camera, and some of it is a little huge, I'm not gonna lie. The battery life. Battery life to me is terrible. I'm not gonna say terrible, but it's bad. Reason why it's bad, the batteries are very small. Now batteries for this camera, it takes the NP-BX1 from Sony. I also have alternates that I bought from Amazon that are pretty much the same, they're just not from Sony. However, this battery is super small. I don't know if you guys can tell. It's really small. So when you're shooting high quality footage like 4K, you're not gonna get a lot of battery life out of this battery. So it is very suggested that you get multiple batteries with this camera. Right now I have 3, so I can tell you straightforward, if all 3 are fully charged and I'm shooting 4K, I'll probably get max an hour and a half before all 3 of them are dead and I have to recharge all of them. Battery life to me is not great on the Sony ZV-1 at all. So if you're a person that is vlogging majority of your day or you're recording a lot of footage, I would say either get at least 5 batteries or use another camera, because this battery life is not that great. Another huge con for the Sony ZV-1 is the fact that it overheats a lot. If you are in a space where it's hot all year round or it's really hot during the summertime, you're gonna struggle with this camera. I've had times where the camera lasts me a good hour in terms of not overheating, and I've had other times where literally 5 to 10 minutes in, this camera overheats and it shuts down because it needs to cool itself. Fanning and the cooling system in this camera is not great, so just keep that in mind if you're somebody that lives, say, in Phoenix, Arizona, or you live in Florida or California, where during the summertime it gets really hot. Chances are if you take this camera outside, it's gonna burn out, it's gonna overheat, plus the battery not being super large, you're probably gonna have a terrible time when it comes to recording on this camera. Now you can compensate that by, you know, obviously staying in cool places. If you're in an AC or if you're in a car, make sure to turn the AC on, and your camera should be fine. Or if you don't want to record a long period of time, you can probably record maybe 5 to 10 minutes and then stop, give it a minute, maybe like 2 minutes, and then re-record. Although with that, you might miss out some good content. So I would say if you're somebody that's recording a lot of your day or you're recording things that's kind of on the fly, the Sony ZV-1 may not be the best option for you. However, if you're somebody that's recording short content or you don't want to record too much, then the Sony ZV-1 would be a good option. Lastly, I know you guys saw this setup before, but this lens is not super wide when it comes to vlogging, and vlogging, a wide angle lens is very essential. Now they did upgrade this in the Sony ZV-1 Mark II, but the lens on this one is not great in terms of it being wide. It's super close, which is why I got this small attachment for about 15 bucks, but it makes it wider. So if you're getting the Sony ZV-1, I would recommend, I'll leave the Amazon storefront down below so that you can go get this attachment if you have the Sony ZV-1. Just know if you do have the camera or you're looking to get this camera body lens is not wide and it's not interchangeable, so you're gonna need to get that attachment. Now let's go into the DJI Osmo Pocket 3. Again, I have not had this camera super long, but I can tell you right now that this is probably my favorite vlogging camera that I have out of all 3. I would say the biggest pro that I can talk to you about is the fact that it's super tiny. It is smaller than Sony ZV-1. It's smaller than an iPhone. It's probably the smallest camera I have in here. It kind of reminds me of a GoPro, just a little bit bigger, but essentially this is a 4K camera. It shoots the same as the Sony ZV-1. You have a 2-inch touchscreen. I think the Sony ZV-1 is like a 1.6 touchscreen. Oh, I'm lying. Sorry, the touchscreen is way bigger than 1.6. I lied. Now both cameras are touchscreen. However, this camera can shoot both vertical and horizontal. The Sony ZV-1 can shoot vertical as well. However, you literally have to turn the camera and you have to edit that in post. Whereas this camera, literally, as soon as you flip the screen, is shooting vertical, and if you flip the screen horizontal, it's shooting horizontal. Second thing I could talk about this camera is that it shoots 4K at 60 frames a second, and it also shoots 120, I believe, in 4K as well. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this camera can shoot both and is super crispy. I'm telling you right now, even though you shoot vertical and it shoots 3K, it still looks good. But the fact that you can shoot 120 on this camera, unheard of. This camera also comes with active tracking so that it can track your face whenever you're moving. So it has a setting to where if you move to the left, it moves to the left with you without actually having to move the camera. Whereas the Sony ZV-1, you actually have to move the camera to follow you. So that's a nice touch, especially for somebody that's, you know, constantly walking, or they want to catch footage where they don't necessarily have the camera in their hand, but they want the camera to follow them anyways. That is a nice touch. And it runs on a gimbal, a 3 gimbal axis. So in terms of stabilization, it's really smooth. Now I have saw some footage of other people that have this camera where, you know, it gets a little jittery, but that's because, you know, it's using a motor system in terms of following you and tracking you. So it's not going to be super, you know, smooth, but just the fact that you have it, it looks good on its own. And from my experience, it looks good. The last 2 pros I can say about this camera, number 1, it has a wireless mic. Even though the end camera body to me is not the best, I don't think it's better than the Sony ZV-1. However, it does come with a wireless mic if you get the creative combo. And the DJI Mic 2 transmitter sounds so good. When I'm telling you it sounds good, I mean so good. It almost competes with this in-house mic. And I'm gonna be honest with you, the fact that this in-house mic is even close to the DJI mic is unheard of. It's outrageous. And the last big thing, and I think is probably the biggest pro for this camera, is the fact that it shoots 10-bit and it shoots D-Log. Now obviously for my video editors, you know what that is, but for people that are, you know, kind of beginning in content, you know, that's not super huge. However, when it comes to D-Log, it actually shoots in a flat profile, so that when it comes to color grading and color editing, you have room to play with the colors. You have an option to change it, whereas if you shoot in a regular picture profile, you don't have that option. So shooting D-Log helps in terms of dynamic range. It makes your footage looks more cinematic. You get the option to play around with the colors, whereas in the Sony cameras, at least the Sony ZV-1, you don't have that option. Now with the cons for the DJI Osmo Pocket 3, I mentioned this before in the beginning. Now it takes a micro SD card instead of a full SD card. Not a deal breaker. If you have a SD card adapter, you can easily plug it in. It's fine. You get the same amount of footage as you do a regular SD card, depending on the space that you buy. But for me, I like a full SD card. Reason being, it's super tiny. So if you lose it or you drop it, it's easier to break. 2, it's easier to lose. Secondly, the flip out screen controls a lot in terms of being touchscreen, shooting vertical versus horizontal. However, I have seen from other creators or other people that have it on social media, once that flip out screen kind of breaks, you know, the camera becomes very jittery. You can't do the horizontal versus vertical. And in terms of powering on the camera, even though you can hold the record button and turn it on, it is another way to turn the camera on. So you will have a major problem if you don't have the right protection for this camera. And I will say in terms of durability, the Sony ZV-1 is a little bit more durable because it's bigger. Now, granted, I've broken my screen on the Sony ZV-1. Whereas the Osmo Pocket 3, I've just gotten it. So in terms of durability, of course, I'm being extra cautious because it's a small camera. However, you do have to keep that in mind. Because it's small, it's easier to break. Just be very careful. I've also heard, I don't know if it's entirely true, the cover that comes with the DJI Osmo Pocket 3 has been the cause for some people for the screen to break. So just being very cautious, or getting a third-party accessory to cover the DJI Osmo Pocket 3 is very crucial. And then lastly, for the cons, I would say the mic on battery. I mean, the on-camera mic is not super great. It sounds good, but it's not decent enough for me to, in terms of editing, get like good quality footage. So I would recommend getting the transmitter if you need it. You have to charge multiple things in order to make the camera cohesive and work. Now, while it does come with a battery extender, so you can plug the DJI Osmo Pocket 3 to extend its battery life, you will need to charge the transmitter by itself. So if, say for example, your Osmo Pocket 3 is fully charged, but you forgot to charge the transmitter or the microphone that it comes with in the creator combo, you're gonna have to use the body mic. And to me, it doesn't sound great. It sounds good, it's decent, depending on the situation that you're in. But if you're in a noisy space or if you're in a loud section, the mic is not good enough to me. So just keep that in mind. You do have a lot of accessories to charge up in order to make this camera cohesive in terms of the mic, the battery extender, and the Osmo Pocket 3 by itself. So yeah, guys, that's everything. Obviously, lastly, which one would I recommend for beginners or people that are starting in content? And honestly, both of them are great. Obviously, they both have their cons. You have to pick whatever con works for you. For some people, the battery life is not a huge deal. For others, that is a huge deal. At the end of the day, both of these cameras are great. So I can't necessarily tell you which camera to get. Right now, I'm using the Osmo Pocket 3 more than the Sony ZV-1, obviously because it's new, and it allows me to shoot different perspectives in terms of, you know, getting different shots, different angles because it's smaller. But I've used the Sony ZV-1 for years, and even though it's had its problems, it's had its bad days, it still got me a lot of footage to this day. So, but at the end of the day, thank you guys for watching this video. I hope you learned a lot, and I hope that this made the choice easier for you in terms of what camera to get. Obviously, the more cameras I get into, you know, the office or wherever I'm at, you know, I will review them for you guys. But until then, make sure to like and subscribe if you like this content, and for more content down below. And I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.